Here I find you. I think I can love you.
Hello and welcome back, everybody, to the How Strong podcast. Great to have you guys back here. A while back, we had Travis King, and we were talking about some really important issues that we're all experiencing right now, or just in general, with depression and anxiety, and just how we all get through it on our journey. So great to have you guys all back. We want to circle that back again, Troy. So why don't you let everybody know what we were talking about before, so we can kind of pick up where we left off.
Yeah, so we had a really good opportunity to talk with Travis King. He created a company, him and his wife, and created this RV company. And they created and still create some really nice luxury RVs. And we had a lot of comments. One of the comments that kept coming up was, what Travis did and Elizabeth did is very complex. And they wanted to dive in a little bit deeper in, one, you had this idea, you had this inspiration to do it. What they want to know is what are all those little things in between that you had to do? So you had an idea, I want to do this RV called the Purpose.
Yes.
What were those steps once you had the idea and how you were going to move it forward?
Okay. So in 2019, late 2019 is when we decided that we wanted to build a trailer. We called it the Purpose because we felt that going out, it gives people purpose in their lives, and purpose in your life is very important for a healthy life. So we called it Purpose. We went with a small trailer thinking that it would be easier to work with. And actually that was a mistake in the sense of it being easier. Smaller doesn't necessarily mean easier. Actually, smaller made it more complicated for a couple of reasons. And I'll get into that later. But the first thing that you do, and what we learned in automotive, because that's what we were taking, is what we learned in automotive to apply it, was that to do this and build a mule. So a mule is a mock-up of what you're building. In automotive, a lot of times a mule is kind of a exterior form factor. You might be doing clay, you might be doing something along those lines, and then you're trying to package things inside of this space. So you might have like an interior mule where it's the hard points of the interior, where you're trying to package in the seats, you're trying to package in all these other things. In our case, we're doing a mule that was based on a trailer. So we did it out of wood. And a lot of times you use wood in these cases because it's very easy to change. You want to be able to cut it. You want to be able to move it. You want to be able to play with it. So we built this wooden mock-up of this trailer space. And then you use that for packaging. So now we start figuring out what can fit and where. So we start buying things. So we start, a lot of times we were buying stuff on Amazon like crazy, not going directly to the manufacturer. We were just trying to buy things to see what fit in. And then from there, we would decide which manufacturer we would start talking to when we go into the design phase. So the very first step is package it in the mule, get in it, sleep in it, try it, make sure that it feels right. So that's the first step.
Let me ask you a question though. So from the beginning though, you knew you wanted to be different. And
yes.
we touched on this the last time we spoke, but there was some other questions, and we got this during the wrap up, and I know that we wanted to do it on your podcast. But you talked about the shower. So we already know that thematically your Purpose RV trailer is going to be different.
Right. Yes. Yeah. There are certain features. You're right. So back in 2014, if we go even further back, we started a RV rental business, and we had up to like 10 RVs in our fleet. So from the experience of cleaning those, using them, you get a really good feel for what works and what doesn't work, or what you would want changed. So you're right. Before we went in building the mule, we already had you call it a PDL. It's a product definition letter. And the PDL is used for giving you an idea as to what are you building? What are you designing? So we ended up working with that to start as a general view. It wasn't detailed. It was just, how do we want to be different? Where do we want to focus on? What were our major pain points that we were trying to solve? And then we did get into building the mule based on that.
Yeah, so that I think that's the crucial piece, because we had talked about this too on some other podcasts. The reason why some companies fail and some succeed, I think yours is crucial because you knew that there was white space that needed to be solved. You didn't build a trailer because Travis wanted a trailer like this. You
Right.
built this trailer because you had extensive amount of experience with the rental company, but you're also the automotive company. So you knew exactly how to go about getting customer feedback, doing clinics, which you did. Talk about how much research actually has to go into this beyond you just thinking that the idea. I mean, you have to support it. What was that like actually going out and getting the information that you needed?
Well, a lot of times we use questionnaires. So we'll use SurveyMonkey as a way to just ask a few pertinent questions to a targeted audience. So that we have used a couple of times in the past. We did use that in this case as well. And then a lot of it's also just talking with people who used our RVs and seeing, just we were very customer centric from the beginning. Even as an RV rental business, good luck finding one that has 5-star reviews on Yelp. We had 5-star reviews on Yelp all the way through. So this was one of these things that we were so customer centric. So whenever we got feedback from people, we took it in and we tried to understand it better. So this really helped us when we started constructing the documentation for building this. We had a lot of information from past renters. We had information from surveys. And then just talking to people in the industry, people who are off-grid campers. We know quite a few of those, and started asking them questions about what they would be interested in or what are their pain points that we're trying to solve.
And what did you, I want to touch on this too, because you've seen a different type of human behavior when people come in and rent your RVs. What was I don't know how to put this lightly, but if they don't own it, they don't care, basically. You're renting these things to people and they're going out and they bring them back like they're not theirs. And I wanted to touch on that too, because you used to tell me all the time when they would come, not all the time, but you had some people come in that really did treat this stuff like shit when they brought them back.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're always going to get some of those. And fortunately for us, we did more of a member-based model. So we had a lot more returning customers, and that helped us mitigate that. So we were catering more to locals who wanted to rent as opposed to people traveling in. So a lot of our marketing for rentals was to market local. That helped us a lot, but you still get those people that don't care. They're driving the RV at 80 miles per hour, which is ridiculous. You shouldn't be doing that. Or they go into freezing temperature areas where the water lines end up leaking, and then you have to deal with that. So yeah, I mean, we've had to deal, and cleanliness as well. So yeah, we had to deal with a lot of those things. Those also come into play when we were designing our trailer, like cleanliness. Mm-hmm. A great example, because we had to clean these RVs thoroughly all the time. So what was important for us is, how do you make a trailer that's easy to clean? Because after you're done with your trip, you're exhausted. You don't want to spend the next 4 hours cleaning your RV. So what we were thinking through as we were going through the design side of things is, how do we make this easy to clean? Like, you can literally take a hose and literally just wash out the trailer. And these are the things that we learned along the way, dealing with RV campers that are renting, and the abuse that they put into things is, how do we make it easy to clean? How do we pick items like features that aren't easy to break, that are easy to understand? Simplicity. How do we make this simpler? And that fed in a lot into the design on our trailers.
Yeah. I could tell when you had that buck there, you actually had an elevated bed, so that if you wanted to spray underneath it, you could actually spray underneath it, and you had drainage under there as well, which was absolutely unique. One of the other questions was, when did you know when you had to cut the tie between you were no longer going to be working for a company and you were going to be working for yourself?
That's a hard one. It's such a hard decision to make, Troy. I mean, the entrepreneurial spirit always wants me to just go out there and do something new and try to make something better. But then there's this other side of me where I'm a family man, and I have my wife and kids to think about, and I have to think about my retirement. I'm getting older now. I know it's not noticeable, but I am aging.
No.
And then, no, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to darken it and make it look nice like yours. Then I would think through, are we able to take this chance? Can we risk this? With Elizabeth, my wife also working, it allowed me to decide to, okay, I'm going to take this chance knowing that we still have income from somewhere else that can support the family. And with that, then once we built the mule and we talked to people about it and they said, we would love to have this, like we want this product. That's when I decided to jump completely. And just, it's either all or nothing. And at that point, it's hard to do something just lightly. If you do it just a little bit, it won't do anything. It won't move. We needed to have a commitment on this, so I jumped in.
So what was the most, I'm going to say traumatic, but I think one of the most complicated things, you and I have, and Lisa has done this as well. We've worked for big companies before. We've managed people before, and the difference between managing people at a company is that the company supports their lifestyle, supports them with health insurance, it supports them with a lot of other things that they need to survive. You had to take that responsibility on your own. So you did have people working for you. And now you're responsible for their livelihoods. You're cutting checks, you're giving them health insurance, and it's all based on you and your idea and hoping it gets successful and that you guys can actually build this big company. How stressful is it, not just managing people, but now being responsible for people?
Actually, I didn't think about the responsibility side too much. I was so focused on driving things forward that anybody who had an interest in being a part of this team and being a part of this effort, I didn't think about, I figured they thought about their own livelihood. It was up to them to take that chance. And that we communicated, this is a startup company. We are not guaranteeing success in this. We have no idea if we'll be able to pay you next month. Like if you join up, you're joining up with the understanding that you're part of the startup team, you're part of the core team, and you're taking a chance. So I wasn't thinking about their family's livelihood. I figured that's what they're responsible for. But my responsibility was to communicate the risk and them taking on this job, but not only the risk, but also the excitement and the potential reward.
So I actually never thought about that before. So then your outlook really is, if you're going to come on board with us, my focus is going to be 100% on the company. And you can't be concerned with how they're going to feed their families or pay their rent. It really is just about your idea and making sure this thing works.
Yeah. And I mean, the one thing I do is I give them a paycheck. So, I mean, it's not that they don't have a paycheck. And as a small business, we felt it was still important to have health coverage. We also needed health coverage ourselves. So we provided health coverage for the employee. And even for our size of company, we were providing the health coverage for the individual. And then they could decide if they want to add their family at additional charge.
Yeah. And I have to think too that you owned the RV rental company. So you've actually run a company before.
Yeah.
The idea though, that with this particular company, a lot of the people, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a lot of people that you knew coming on board helping you. How many of those people were in that sort of friend zone and working for you? And then did anything negative come out of that? Are you still friends with the same people who started up that company with you?
Yes. So 3 of the people who started up with us are people that we've worked with before. One on the design side, the second one on the design side as well, but also more of a fabricator. And then another, which was more on the production management. And so these 3 people had joined up with us and were considered part of our core team. We still communicate with them to this day, even going through what I'm thinking you're going to end up talking about is the hardship of closing up a business. But we still talk to each other, and it's one of those journeys, those hard journeys that you do together, and you fought together and you fought with each other even. But at the end of the day, you gave a hug and you moved on because you knew that if we're going to make this successful, we have to work together. And we had times definitely where there were arguments and there was high passion, high energy, positive and negative as we went through this over from 2019 to 2022.
Yeah, I think that's the lesson I learned in this whole startup, especially if you're leading startup companies. And I had to say this out loud to someone because it really is sort of what I was asking. A lot of the times I'm asking your opinion, I'm not asking permission. And that's the hardest thing for people to understand when you own your company and you're running forward. You definitely have equity in the company. You definitely are able to have an opinion. But most of the time I'm asking you, it's not for permission. And I think that's where, if you're upfront with them from the beginning, it's a lot easier. 6 months into it, when I'm telling them, just remember, I'm not asking your opinion. I'm asking your opinion, not permission. And then they sort of kind of get offended by that. But I would say for you specifically, you carry the most risk. And you definitely have the better idea of how this is going to be successful because you've done most of everything that you're doing already.
I'll say maybe on that one, but you're right. We are taking the most risk. I mean, we put in $250,000 of our own money. We put in actually everything we have. Mm-hmm. And that was the hardest thing, is to empty out all of your accounts and go all in. And that's what we did. So we did have a significant amount to risk. However, what I was going to talk about is that when these guys joined up, it was all about my vision. But as they worked with me and as they became part of the company, it was interesting to transition from it being my vision to being our vision, and if we were going to allow that. So for some companies, the founder is the visionary and you just follow along, but you can have, like you said, you can have your opinion, but that's it. And what I was working with is trying to balance that with some very strong-minded people who are also bought in on the idea. So they felt a sense of ownership. Mm-hmm. And so there were times when we butted heads, not in a good way, like where there was one particular person that him and I we had definitely about a month of our time where we were butting heads way too much, to the point where it became toxic. Mm. And the only thing that we could do to address that was to change our roles, change how we work together. And actually, I had to ask him to basically step down, because for some reason we could not work together on that same level. He wasn't happy about that change initially, but we maintained our friendship through all of that. And he was still contributing. It just wasn't to the level that he was before. Yeah. So, but you're right. Once somebody starts working and they start feeling a sense of ownership into the company, which you want that passion. However, if you can't have it so that you can step down when the founder makes a decision and you can't step down and say, okay, I'm going to support this decision, that's where there's a problem.
Yeah. And I think, and I can tell you this from my own self, when I was with, I would say even when I was with DeLorean, I would say when you're in that role and you own a piece of the company and you have a specific job that you need to get done, things are moving fast and you have a lot of success because you know what you're doing. And I think there comes a point, and I think it's because you have the maturity in you, and maybe I didn't at that time, is you can start believing your own shit. You can start believing that you can do no wrong because you've had a successful career. And I love that you're giving me these opinions, but I've got this mapped out in my head and this is how it's going to work. And I know that it's going to be successful if we do it this way. And I don't know that I was listening to a lot of people at the same time, because I had this vision of where I wanted to go. I've seen this happen millions of times because I've been in the automotive business for so long. I would say early on, I wasn't as open to opinions because this was the ship that I was steering. And I think you can get caught up in that kind of stuff. And I think it's the wrong way to do it. But I think because the spotlight is on you to succeed, that I'm willing to go down with this ship. And every mistake that I make is my own. I don't know that the other people are willing to do that.
That's an interesting point, because one of the things that aided in my change of leadership, that actually there's two things. One is I've been at those companies too, where I was the lower level person with ideas. And I knew, based on having a broad understanding of what was going on at that company, I had some really good ideas, and I felt like I wasn't listened to at all. And what that did is that demotivated me. So I didn't want somebody to feel like they can voice their opinion, but that it really didn't matter. And because then that's exactly what would happen. You'd have a bunch of demotivated star employees, and you don't want that. The other thing that changed my direction, and it's going to suck right now because I'm terrible with names, and so I'm not going to remember his name, but I'm sure as soon as I mention this, other people will know who I'm talking about. So there's a submarine commander who did this awesome speech online about leadership and how he changed the way that that he commanded his submarine. And instead of being everything focused on him to make decisions, he delegated the authority on a submarine, except for pushing the red button. So he had it so that other people made these decisions. And this actually helped me in a big way, because the way he described it, it made a lot of sense. And so when I started up RKS, I actually changed the way that I managed people. I was working on changing the way that I manage people to try to delegate more and try to give more responsibilities, give direction, but give responsibilities to these separate areas and have them make decisions. So that was a really key thing for me.
You gave them a little bit of room to grow.
I would give them direction. So I would tell them, ultimately, here's the target. Do we all understand the target? Yes, across the board. Excellent. You work on this, you work on this, and you work on this. We'll get everything together, and then we'll see what it looks like.
Yeah, and that's the right way to go about doing that. I mean, it's something that you have to learn as you go, but you have to be cognizant and mature enough to know when you're failing also. That's a huge piece to remember. If anybody's starting up a company, what in that particular sense, what you just said, what's the first thing that you'd be doing with your people if you started a company today?
Planning. Always planning. You can tell the outcome of a company or of a product based on how well it's planned. And this we've seen in our past lives, where something wasn't planned properly, wasn't organized properly, and it ends up failing. And I'll tell you, one of the things that helped us the most was that Elizabeth, my wife, was probably one of the best organized planners that I've ever met or worked with. And so by her helping understand what this needed to look like, instead of me being Mr. Cowboy and I'm just going to build it, she was more about, okay, we need to plan around this. We need to have, each of the areas identified. What are we trying to achieve? All this stuff. And so having somebody with you when you start this up, who's an organized person, who's a planner, is critical for the success.
So this is going to lead right into this last question, which is, and we touched upon this the last time we had spoke. You have a significant amount of experience in the automotive business.
Yes.
Elizabeth does, because I used to work with her at NIO. She was the program manager for NIO for a particular, pretty much there was a car being designed at NIO at the time. She was managing the PDL.
Mm-hmm.
She's brilliant. She had worked in manufacturing before, correct?
She worked for Magnus Steyr prior. and doing huge projects.
And Magnastyle, that's probably one of the most well-known contract manufacturers in the world for multiple OEMs. And if anybody thinks that Mercedes-Benz or BMW builds all their vehicles in their own plants, that's a mistake. They absolutely do not. They contract manufacture. A lot of them do because it's cheaper. And that's a huge job that Elizabeth had. So and I've worked with her again. She is amazingly good. She's going to be on this podcast. She's going to help manage this podcast after I talk to her after we're done with this podcast.
Do you need some organization, Troy?
We need some organization for sure. 100% organization. But I'll tell you this, Lisa. Just be prepared because she's no joke. She'll emails, phone calls. Is this done? Is that done? And she ultimately though, she's really good at her job, and she's actually a really good person. So it'll be a warm welcome to have someone come in here and kind of, make sure that we have our shit together. But understanding that she's very good at that, and Travis is an amazing guy as well. So you have two really good people who know what they're doing. You guys were both in the RV business. You guys were in the automotive business. Automotive manufacturing. You know the best engineering, the best products to use. You built your own RV. You have the most talented people. And I remember when I was actually at your shop, and I can't remember the guy's name, but in 2015, and I'm going to put it up on the screen because it's one of my favorite cars. It was at the LA Auto Show, and it was the Mercedes-Benz GT Vision car. And it was the one instance where I've taken that image with me. And when I went to DeLorean, I said, this is what we need to do. We need to create a vehicle that unconsciously compels us to interact with it.
It stimulates emotion.
Yeah, but not that I know. So I remember being at the auto show during press day, and I saw this car, and then between where I was standing and where the car was, I lost time. And I was actually putting my hand on the shoulder of the car. And I had no idea what I was doing, except it compelled me unconsciously. So there's a conscious compulsion, which is if you get stimuli and you go, oh, okay, so this is what's here, and now I'm going to interact with it based on what I see and how I'm interacting with the product. The unconscious is not knowing what those things are. You just are now touching the car. And that's what happened to me. And I've brought that forward every time. Even at DeLorean, I wanted to create a product that unconsciously compelled you to do something. And the guy who modeled the Vision car was the guy, he did the clay for it. He worked for you.
Oh, okay.
He's the guy that had the dog.
Yes. You're talking about Armin.
So Armin used to work, when I was there, he was at Karma. And he's a brilliant guy. And then I was at the shop, and I'm like, dude, you're that guy. And he was the one who did the clay for that Vision car, or at least a portion of it. And I was like, this is incredible. You have the most talented people at your shop.
Yes.
The best engineers, the best designers, the best program manager, the best product in a white space that needed your product. And at the end of the day, that wasn't enough.
No, it wasn't enough. There was a few things that contributed to that. One was the pandemic. That right when we started going through the design phase, the pandemic hit, and that it was a huge hiccup. And when I say hiccup, it was a hiccup not only just from getting people to help build, but it was also from a supply chain perspective. It was so disruptive, which everybody felt with their toilet paper, couldn't wipe their ass anymore. Mm-hmm. So it was one of these things that the supply chain was completely screwed up, and it really stayed screwed up for a good year to year and a half. We were still feeling the effects. So those two factors definitely made it a challenge. Then when we found good people to build the trailer, we went through probably 50% of them with attrition. And the attrition was mainly because you would get a few people who are willing to work, but a lot of people just wanted to get the unemployment. And so they didn't put the effort in. And not only that, but we had a very strict type of culture we were looking for. So it's really important for us early on, especially with a small team, to have a group of people who work really well together. So the personalities need to work well together. The workmanship, the drive needs to all be there. No slackers, people who want to do a great job. You don't have to ask them to do a great job. They just do it. And so we went through quite a bit of attrition. That didn't help. And then the last factor, which is probably the most critical of all, is we weren't able to raise the amount of capital that we needed to launch the company truly. So we had an initial investor who came in, was enough to get us building, but it wasn't enough to get us to the economies of scale that we needed to bring the costs down on the trailer. So every trailer we kicked out, it would cost more than the actual revenue. And so we have basically one of these situations where even if I cranked it up, it wouldn't be able to turn a profit. I couldn't move price because we were priced appropriately. I couldn't, and then everything else is cost. And the cost is either the raw materials, which our volumes were too low to step down to anything lower, or production. And so when it came to production, it was throughput. I needed throughput. I needed fixtures. I needed tooling. So all these builds, these first builds, have a lot of customization in them. And this is where it goes to what you were talking about, Troy, whereas, how did you source all these things? How did you get all these parts in and build these with such a small team? The way that we did it was that a good portion of it was custom built. These were like bespoke trailers, literally being kicked out at prices where it's production type pricing. And so we just couldn't get the investment in. And I went after investment like crazy. I'll tell you, some of these investors, they were just, unless you are already turning a profit, we're not interested. So we couldn't do anything there. And then if we were so early stage, it seems like a lot of these investors, they wanted you to already have 1,000 orders, on the books. And I don't have 1,000 orders on the books. In fact, we're spending so much of our money just trying to produce these things. We were spending maybe $1,000 to $2,000 a month on marketing. I didn't have the funds to kick into marketing. So that was the hard part, is the limited cash that we had. Do you focus on the product? Do you focus it more on the marketing, like just to sell the product, but not build it? Or are you focused on development of technologies which looks sexy so that the investor is willing to put in more money because you have a patent? And so it was a really difficult thing on scarcity of cash. How do you spend it? And we decided to spend it on the product. We decided that we were going to build the best quality product and that will help push us. The investors don't care that it's a quality product, and they didn't put any money in. And so what ended up happening is we starved. We ran out of cash. We could not support it with the revenues, no matter what we were trying to do. And even though we have great team, we have great technology, we have a product plan to get us to being the best off-grid trailer in the world, it didn't matter. None of that mattered. And so it all came down in July of last year. It's been over a year now that the company hasn't been operating, but hasn't been closed either.
And that's sort of the sad thing too, because you had a perfect use case, because when you were going through COVID, on one hand, you couldn't get investors to invest in RKS or the purpose, but because of COVID, it actually amplified your RV rental business.
Yeah, so that was such a hard thing too, because we were using the same workspace for the RV rental business as for RKS. And because we decided we're going all in with RKS, we actually closed up our RV rental business because we couldn't handle both. We didn't have enough resources. We didn't have enough space to do both. So while the pandemic was happening, which we didn't expect, right? We already made this decision. We're going RKS. And so the rental business had to close. We already made that decision. Then the pandemic hits, and then the RV rental business takes off. But by that time, I already sold half of my RVs. I was already closing things up. So
Bad timing.
Terrible timing. But we held to our decision. It was one of these things that, do we stop doing RKS and then move over to RV rentals again? But no, this wasn't our passion. We understood it. We know how to do it really well, but it's not our future. And so we decided to just let it go. And we tried selling it, but selling an RV rental business it wasn't lucrative.
Yeah. So what's that thought process then? So you equally had a moment where you decided you were going to bet on yourself. Your whole family did. Mm-hmm. And then a few years later, you have to make a decision to close it up. Is it the same conversation?
It's more of a forced thing rather than a decision. I no longer had a decision. I mean, the decision was that there's no money in the bank. You can't make payroll. Without people to build, you can't move the company. The only thing you can do is hope that you can get investment. And we tried. We reached out to so many VCs that talk about sustainment and climate change and things like that help the world be a better place, better quality. And still, even with what we've done, we talked to a couple of them, and that was it. It didn't go anywhere further than the first meeting. And here we have, I had a core team. I had a great product. I have technologies that are going to just change the way that off-grid works, especially when it comes to sewage processing and bringing it back to water that you can drink. It didn't matter.
What's the silver lining though? Is there a silver lining?
The silver lining is this conversation that we're having right now, Troy. This is the silver lining. The silver lining is the knowledge that's come from it that I can share with other people. And I'll tell you, I'm not one for failure. I'm not one to just be beaten down and not get back up again. And with all of this last year being in a depressed state, when I say a depressed state, Troy, I'm talking like you think about your life. You think about where you are and you think about a lot of things you otherwise wouldn't. But I'm not one to give up. And I love my family and I don't want to put them through what was going on in my mind, what was going on in my heart, everything. I mean, RKS, it stands for my kids.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I think the other thing too that, and I just saw this the other day and it didn't hit me. Actually, a friend of mine told me about this a few years ago. And he goes, if you looked at your life as seasons, then you'll understand that at this moment right now, you have about 30 more Christmases, you have 30 more summers, and that's it. And the way that people our age look at time now is we have this window. And everything in this tiny little window needs to happen. And most people don't get to see it that way. And I think because this space now is very visible, the things that we do now are more significant. And we need to be very particular and cautious about how we use our time. And it's not to be depressed. It's not to get into that negative space. That's if you had a choice. And we're going to talk about depression and panic attacks and stress, because a lot of the times those things aren't a choice. Those things happen to you. They creep up on you. But in your particular case, when we talk about how strong, and I'm going to say this again because I had this conversation with Travis. I remember I was at work and we talked about the last podcast, but he had this glimmer. He was trying to get investment from a bank. And they were sort of stringing him along like, it looks good, it looks good, it looks good. And there was no doubt in their mind that something positive was going to happen. And they just pulled the rug right underneath them and said, no. And I don't know if that was a low point. I don't know if that was the lowest point you had, but I can't imagine having that much hope. And then a second later, it's gone. And then you got to go, okay, that just happened. And now we need to keep going. So that's sort of the tough piece, I think.
Yeah, the tough piece going through any kind of startup is the emotional roller coaster, the ups and downs, and having hope even when things are going down. And that hope is so necessary because it's what drives you to push forward and get back up the next hill. You're going so low and it's so dire that you end up feeling like you can't get out. And even it's heartbreaking to let your employees go. And especially when you care about them so much and you've gotten to know them so long, and then you have your customers that you start caring about your customers, and then they have a problem, and they need help with, and you don't have the resources.
Yeah.
I was literally, for warranty type stuff, just trying to help walk somebody through something I knew very little about, because the person who was an expert, I had to let go. So you have this sense of responsibility, and the hard part is they don't see it. I had dealers contacting me, well, you owe us money. Like, we put a deposit down, and we used whatever funding we could to try to get this product done and get it out. But you're letting these people down. And it's not that I didn't take their money to take it and steal, but then it comes across that way. Then they start hating you. They start saying all these mean things about stuff, and that you're just a bad person, and nicer words. But that's not who we were. I mean, we were just live, and we were just pushing, and we were just trying to do everything we could to get this off the ground. And when things hit the fan, when shit hits the fan, you really know who your real friends are. You really know who's your true partner, because the ones that just beat you up when you're down already, and they take the bat and they just start fucking hitting you, even though that you're having a hard time trying to get this company back up and running. It's never going to make it happen. And then they just abuse, and we've had people that literally called on our personal phones and harassed us and everything, as if we chose for the company to be in the situation that it's in. We did not choose this. We made the effort to try to make this happen. We did not sit in our seats and dream. We got off our seat, and we executed. We did everything we could to make this successful.
Yeah, and I can tell you, just from speaking with you, and then just with being in the startup space, there's two statements that I know are very true. When it rains, it pours, 100%, more often than you think it's going to happen. And that there is no bottom, because the worst day of your life, it could get worse, and it will get worse. And if you think you're at the bottom, you're not. It will always get worse. I've seen a lot of people go, "This is the worst day of my life." I'm like, it's not. I promise you. There's a lot more room to go, especially in this startup space. So it's very difficult, which is why we do House Strong, which is why we say it's very, I don't think people understand how difficult it is to start up a company, lead a company, try to make it successful, sustain it, manage people, and carry that. And you're going to carry it home, Travis. I know you did. I mean, it's something you live with 24 hours a day.
Yeah. It's impacted my family, but it's impacted the kids. And I'll have to say, there is another silver lining to this.
Mm-hmm.
So I am proud of that.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that they must have felt so proud of their father for actually doing something that I think now today is part of the American dream, to be an entrepreneur, to say, I want to be my own boss. I have an amazing idea, but execution is a mother. But that to be an adult, you had to make a very come to Jesus moment, or look yourself in the mirror and say, is this sustainable? And that must have been so hard, but you did it, and you're still going through it. And that is exactly what this podcast is all about, to talk about your tenacity, the faith that you had in yourself to make the right decisions, even though it wasn't the outcome that you wanted, but you came out alive, and your family saw that, and it only made you stronger.
It has. And what also I'm really happy that they got to see is the dynamics between Elizabeth and myself. So their Elizabeth is their stepmother, but really she is as much a mom as their mother is. And they work well together too, which is fantastic. So Elizabeth has shown that even when I was going through my hard times, that she could step up and she was helping support the family and seeing that dynamic where we work with each other. Yes. So when one of your partners is having a hard time, the other partner needs to be stronger and needs to help carry things. And that's not a bad thing. That's part of a partnership.
Yes.
And that's where I'm happy that my kids got to see that in hard times, a lot of times couples break apart. They argue with each other. They don't support each other. They get mad. One gets mad at the other for not doing enough. And instead of working through it, understanding what the other person's going through, come up with a plan. And that's what we did. So what I'm really also happy about is not only did they get to see Elizabeth and me start a company, but then they got to see what happened through all that and through the hard times, how we were able to support each other going through those hard times.
Yeah, and I think and two things. One, I'm going to get Lisa's perspective on this a little bit different. Is I think men do it differently. I think the women in our lives think that we're bionic men and that we can do anything, and our kids think we're never going to die and nothing gets us down. I think we carry that to a point until we're done carrying it, and then we're at a point where it might be too late. So I think for guys like me, I can carry more than I should. And then when I think it's too much, I probably should have involved them earlier. And with Lisa, I'm going to say this in a very positive way too, is that, having a spouse or having family. So Lisa, not married, but if you're doing, if you're at a 60% that one day, your family, I know, will say, then we're going to do 140% on our end. We'll make sure we cover your 40. And that's what my family does. If I'm at 30%, they're going to do 170%. They're going to go, we got you for that 70% that you're missing. And I think obviously spouses are there, but also families, good families will have you. And I think it's difficult to do the kinds of things that we all do if we don't have a good place at home. I would say that if you're going to start up a company, you better have a really good family dynamic and a good home. Make sure your home is set up the way it should be set up. And if that's all good, then you're okay. But if you're broken at home and your family's broken, I'd suggest staying away from any kind of startup. It's just it's not an easy thing. But what I want to end up on something real positive is that Travis has his own channel now. He's developing it, and he's going a different direction, which I think is actually, maybe you went through all of that shit to do this other vertical, which I think is going to be even bigger and better for you and your family. So why don't you tell everybody what you're doing now?
I appreciate that. Yeah. So through all of this, it's about figuring out, it's discovery. So as I was going through depression and trying to figure out what next, like what excites me and what's my purpose anymore, now that I'm not building trailers. So it comes back to what's my knowledge base, what's my experience, and what can I do to make the world a better place and rearrange my priorities. I've definitely rearranged my priorities, Troy. It used to be that money was more of the driver for me, and it's not. Money's nice, and I do want the comforts for my family and myself, but family is the biggest priority now. So with that being said, I've decided that I'm going to share my knowledge by doing a podcast called Off Grid, Good, Bad, and Ugly. And I'm going to take the knowledge that I've taken from RV rentals and also RKS with building and designing out these trailers. And I'm going to educate people about how to build your trailer out to be truly off grid. And when I say truly off grid, I'm not talking just power. I'm talking power, water, sewage, growing food, protection, medicine, all of these things. So I want to make it so that we can take a container and we can drop it anywhere inside of the Arctic and Antarctic Circle, and you could survive for prolonged periods of time. And that, I think, is what's going to make this show really interesting. I've planned out 5 seasons so far. The first season is going to be diving into the technologies, understanding like different technologies for different parts of being off-grid. I'm going to bring in subject matter experts. I'm going to do Pepsi challenges with, maybe 2 air conditioners that say they're the best, and we will find out. The next season is going to be about building out a trailer for true off-season. So I'm going to take those technologies and now apply it into what we would call like a concept trailer. So I'm going to buy an old trailer and I'm going to build it out. And then season 3 is going to be where am I? Because what I'll be doing is taking that trailer through extreme heat in the desert, all the way up to extreme cold, like in Maine or Canada. And I will be testing this unit in different environments. And then 4th season, we're going to go into designing what we call a pod. So my goal is to make it so that we can manufacture off-grid pods. If you will, it's kind of like taking a container and having it, let's say a military operation or some other operation is going on. They can literally drop this container somewhere and they have water, sewage, everything is all built into this pod. So it's a true off-grid container and you can drop it anywhere. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a show that's going to take this all the way and show people all the way from testing out technologies to actually designing and putting into manufacturing an off-grid pod.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing.
It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, and my opinion, I actually said, I'm not even going to mention the company because I think they're bullshit, so I'm not going to mention them, but there's another RV sort of pod-like company being built out in San Jose in Silicon Valley. And
did you just get super specific with location?
Well, I mean, it's San Jose is a big place. Silicon Valley has a lot of stuff going on up there.
Yeah, there's probably more than one company up there doing that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's hundreds of them doing something like that. The issue is they don't have someone like Travis leading that initiative. These people see white space that Travis sees, and they think they spend a few days in the forest going, oh yeah, this is how we solve this problem. And you got someone like Travis who has many years of developing this idea and making it right and doing it for the right reasons and answering all the questions that people have. And it irritates me that they think it's that easy just to say, I got this idea, let's go ahead and do it. And I can tell you right now, Travis is the one that should be doing it. He will do it. He'll be successful at it. And we will be promoting you so they fail. So that's just coming from me, Travis. You don't need to agree for me.
No problem.
But I'm loyal. If anything, I'm loyal.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure that you're taken care of.
I appreciate that. And actually, one of the turning things I think you and I talked about earlier as part of this and turning my life around and starting this podcast is I'm going to do a full arm tattoo sleeve.
That's right.
It represents Ragnarok. And anybody who understands what Ragnarok's about, it is the destruction of the old and the rebirth of new. And so it's time for a change in my life. So I'm actually tatting up the arm, going Ragnarok as a symbol of this change.
That's awesome.
Yes. Let's go.
Let me give you another funny thing, because I know that you'll find this interesting. We're going to do a marketing minute next podcast. And I was going through old patents that have been expired. And I kind of wanted to see what were some of the strangest patents out there that have been expired that nobody really used before. And I stumbled upon one. I'll show it up on the screen here. It's an Advent calendar. It's an adult Advent calendar. So there's 25 doors, and in each door is a condom and a sexual position. And it was a patent idea. They let the patent expire. And I'm like, this is crazy. How do you patent this? And they absolutely did, and it didn't go anywhere. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'm going to start using this, the expired patent website and go through with Lisa to kind of figure out what some of these ideas we can actually bring back to life and kind of and pay for the patent to come back again, and we'll take it over again. But that was the first one I saw, and I was like, this is interesting. I'll see if there's another one out there. But
that's a great idea. Actually, the only area that they screwed up is it shouldn't be with condoms. It should be with a new toy every day. Then you do something.
That's
different.
a big calendar. One of the ones I saw was it was a cocaine advent calendar. So 25 days had 25 different drugs in it. And I'm like, this is insane, but it's on a patent. So one, it's illegal. So I'm not even sure how you'd fill it. I'm sure if you wanted to, you could, but it's probably with something like this. This is absolutely nothing. This actually was a screwdriver, just so anybody's watching came in this thing. So no empty baggies for that particular compensation. But
oh, okay. That's why it's empty. I see.
Well, yeah, because I had to take the screwdriver that I don't even think it fits in here, actually.
You just had to get ready for the show? Is that what this was?
Ready. Yeah, that's all it was. I can write it off because it's a business, so we're okay.
Business expense.
Well, you did hear about that too with the IRS. Like, even if you're doing illegal activity, you're still expected to pay taxes on your illegal activity.
That's
God.
terrible.
Yeah.
That's
So if you get caught and you didn't pay taxes on your stuff, the IRS also comes after you.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I guess you just don't file. I guess that's what you do now. So I love this conversation. I think we've wrapped up Travis, and it got people. A lot of the questions I got was to understand more of what he was going through, and I think we did that today. And I love the fact that you saw the growth that you needed to have, and you went through a dark period. You came out of it, and now you're going through this other vertical, I think, which is amazing. And again, how tough is you, Travis? I mean, that's a shitload to go through to come through the other end and do something on your own. I think is amazing. So you're a really good testament to why this podcast exists. And I'm going to love to see your podcast. And, we'll get, our podcast will get better once Elizabeth gets on board. So we'll include her on the next one so she can talk about her business, and then we'll get going on that one. But thanks, Travis. Thanks, Lisa, for your amazingness. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you, Troy. Pleasure, as always.